I'm currently a student of neuroscience. So I'm doing a PhD, and my research is focused on linking neurodevelopment and neurodegeneration. So now in my incoming fourth year actually. And I did most of my training was in neuroscience. So from my master's to my PhD right now. But before that, like in the Philippines, I was super interested like during high school. So I was super interested in biology. And then I was really like into STEM. But after that, during college, so I went to the University of the Philippines and I did behavioral sciences. So behavioral sciences was really learning about like human behavior, understanding human behavior. And we were studying at different lenses. So psychology, sociology, and anthropology. So we didn't do a lot of like what I'm doing now, like less biology, but more understanding people's behaviors in different contexts. So yeah, so I did that for 4 years, and then after that, um, some people told me because I didn't know. I knew I wanted to study neuroscience back in university because I took like a class, like one class. It was about I think psychopharmacology, where or neuropharmacology, where I was introduced to like neuroscience in a sense that right now there is personalized medicine kind of for people who are suffering from different psychological disorders. So I wanted to understand that like different psychiatric disorders. And so I wanted to understand how do you do like personalized medicine, for example. And then so that's how I started like, okay, looking more into biology, like how do you make these drugs, for example, that are personalized for people who are suffering from depression, from anxiety, for post-traumatic stress disorders. And so I was more focused on like the therapy part that is more like related to the brain, for example, and less about the behavior. So then I started like looking into, okay, how can I study the brain more? And so, but during this time, after I graduated, I didn't know how to, I knew I wanted to study more neuroscience, but I didn't know how to get there, because I didn't know a lot of people in neuroscience. I knew people doing like psychology, who were doing like counseling and therapy in the Philippines because of like people from my university, but I didn't know people who were working on like the brain, for example, unless you go into medicine. So at some point, like I started to apply to medical schools because everyone in my like I think in UP Manila we were very centered on like health courses and everyone was doing medicine. And so I thought, okay, maybe I just do medicine. So I did like the NMAT, like to do like the National Medical Admissions Test, to be able to like get into medical school and then study medicine. And then I thought, okay, maybe I will do medicine first and then I will try to get into like neurology or neurosurgery because I was interested in that. But then I started looking online and then I saw, oh, okay, I can actually do a different path. Like I can do research. I loved research when I was in my in college. And so I thought, okay, why not like try to do a master's abroad? Because I didn't find anything in the Philippines about like masters in neuroscience or like cognitive neurosciences, to better understand like people and how people think and how you can do therapy. Um, and so, but the problem with that is that I didn't know anyone. So I was just looking, I was like Googling things. And then some people who were doing their masters, but not in the same field, they told me, yeah, but you have to have, if you want to go study abroad, you have to have like work experience first to prove that okay, you're really interested in like these different topics, that you're really working, like you have some research experience. So I worked for a bit actually. Like I was a research analyst for two different companies in the Philippines before I started, before I went abroad. So we were doing like trying to understand consumer behavior. So we would make some people like watch commercials or TV programs that analyze their responses, like analyze their face, and then see okay, which stimuli they respond to the most, or which parts of the commercial or the TV program do they not
Yeah.
like.
So
And so
it's actually it's proven and they're actually a science for doing the commercials and TV, right?
yeah, exactly.
So
And then we
yeah.
would interview them afterwards to see, we would give them surveys to see, okay, which brand stands out the most? How do you feel about this specific brand? So it's more like market behaviors. So that was pretty cool. And then during this time, I want to understand, okay, why are we using these? Like, why are we using facial coding to better understand like these behaviors? And then, okay, that brings me back again to neuroscience. Like, what happens in the brain when you see like different commercials, TV programs? Why are you interested in one element more than the other? What gets your attention? So like, okay, still in the brain. So I was working in the Philippines for 2 years. And then I thought, okay, like now let me try to apply abroad because, okay, like now I got some research experience. I can say something. I learned things that are different from what I was doing in university. And then so I applied. And then after 2 years, like that was 2020, I left. So I got in like different programs in Europe. Initially I wanted to apply to the US, but it's super expensive and because of the language, because I didn't know, okay, in Europe there are programs that are in English, because I thought usually, okay, in France most classes are in French. I didn't know French. I didn't know other languages except English and Philippine and Tagalog. So when I was in the Philippines, and then I thought, okay, maybe we go to Spain, but then some classes are in Spanish. So when I was looking, and then I found out, okay, there are programs in Europe, different countries in Europe that are delivered in English actually, and they are much more cheaper than going to the US, because going to the US, like it would cost me millions to study there, like only for a year. Also in Australia, also in Canada. And so I tried, okay, in Europe, for example, for 1 year, like at least when I was in my master's in France, 200 euros for one whole year. 200 to 250, which is like how many? 12,000 pesos to 15,000 pesos for
But
one
that's
whole year.
just for the ano ba, sorry, that's just for the tuition fee or
Yeah,
kasali na
just for the
yung
tuition fee. But of
right,
course, like for living expenses,
iba
like your
naman na yeah.
accommodations, I think it's still much cheaper than if I went to the US also. So, yeah, so I just started to look online. I sent my applications. I didn't use any agency. It's just like, okay, like I online, I write my letter of motivation, what is written in the website, and then I submit, and then around June, July, I started to get responses from my applications. I got into different programs, and then I just had to pick, and I say, okay, then, okay, how do I, now it's time to go. And this was during COVID.
Oh,
So 2020.
right.
That's during COVID,
Sorry, ilang
everything.
ilang months yon before you got a reply? And how many like
Ah,
universities did you apply?
and a lot actually, because I was paranoid.
Yeah, kasi yun
Like,
ang usual na question nakikita ko sa post like yung mga questions like how what do they do sa mga kung ganun like they're
yeah,
basically clueless. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I think because I didn't trust myself before, so I applied to like 10 schools. I started applying for up, up to go into to go to that school year, the following year, September. Some applications start the year before, around November to December. So like if you want to apply for next year, then you have to go before, I mean, this year na. Start some applications open in some countries November, December, October. And then until some early deadlines February, some scholarships also can be early than the like yung full deadline of for the following school year. But I started applying in January, kind of January, February of the same year, which for some may be a bit late. For some schools, medyo late na ako actually. But for others, like right timing. It just has to be a bit early. So like some months, I started January, sending my applications, gathering all the documents. I kind of had an idea of what I needed. Usually mga university registration, birth certificate, and for some schools they require tests. So like at least in the US you have to have like some tests. I don't know if they're still doing it, but at least when I applied, I didn't want to do any tests because that's expensive. Like you have to pay like some amount of like I don't know how much it is, but yeah, you have to pay. Some people, yeah, you are required to have a language test too, like to prove your English. I mean, English capabilities. I think in the UK you have to take like a test to
But
prove your.
sorry, just for answering I suppose it's an online test, no?
No, sometimes like you have to do. I think for in the case of my sister, she had to take like the TOEFL or IELTS,
IELTS.
IELTS. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think you have to go there to like it's not like because they have to assess how you speak, how you write. So I think you have to go there, it's in person, but some I think online, depends. But yeah, for me, I didn't do any of that. So it's not a big requirement in some European universities actually. And so I just had to prepare like some documents. Yeah, you have to think about like if you need like English language tests, other tests to assess like okay, like if you know science, math, whatever. I think like in some universities in the US they do this. I never did any of that. I just had to prepare my documents, submit them, and then do the visa process because you have also like to give your student visa. At least in France, in the French embassy, I had like a pre-departure interview. They would ask you like, what is your purpose of like studying in France? Why do you want to study in France? And then what are your plans after graduation? Something like this. And for other embassies also they do interviews. So then you have to go through the visa process, submit all the documents about that for that, and then I left around August, yeah, August, last week of August to go to start school in September. So
Right.
it's like,
Pero
oh,
sorry, but at this time, Nicole, you were already admitted to a certain school, no? Before you applied
yeah,
to
around,
visa.
yeah,
Kasi,
yeah, exactly. Because they will not allow you
yep.
if you don't
Mm.
have
If
like a
wala
school
kang,
certificate.
yes.
Yeah. So kailangan naka-enroll ka na before you apply to like the whole visa process to have a student visa, for example. What else? Yeah, I think it's mostly that, like for me to get here. There are a lot of scholarships also. I want to mention that I didn't have any. I mean, I didn't apply to any because I was a bit late. Like for some Filipino students, I was a bit late, but I know a lot of people. So like in the Philippines, at least I met them when I was doing my PhD here. So there's a thing called the DOST scholarship. And then there's a Phil-France scholarship. So it's a partnership between Philippines and France. And so they will fund you your accommodation, your school fees, your flight to go and to come back to the Philippines after your studies. A lot of people unfortunately do not know this. So I really when there's like publications from the French embassy to the Philippines about this, I really repost it because not a lot of Filipinos know it. Yeah,
Anong
so this
requirements nito, Nicole, for the scholarship usually?
like, like, I think Phil-France scholarship. Let me check, sorry.
May exam na naman ba?
Wala.
Walang exam.
I don't think
Okay.
so. I don't think so.
Pero like,
It's
what are the, like, anong
I
mga,
think
ano nila?
motivation letter. That's mostly
Okay.
that.
But you
Motivation
have to
letter.
have like good grades, I assume.
Yeah, good grades. Wait, let me check. And you have to apply to a master's or a doctorate program in France. CV. So I just checked. So CV, passport, a copy of your passport, academic essay. So why do you want to study in France? What is your degree? How will your degree benefit the Philippines and the Filipino society? And then academic transcript. So you get from your university, and then proof of financial resources, bank statement, bank certificate, tax return. So it's mostly like what you actually submit also when you apply to universities abroad. So it's kind of like the same thing. Just a tip when applying, I think to universities abroad, like I usually organize my file into like, okay, these are all the things that I need. And it's kind of like the same thing anyways. So for different universities and different countries. So it's just plan in advance, like have all the documents in hand that you need para submit ka na lang submit when the deadlines are already there. And then yeah. So yeah.
You mentioned you mentioned yung bank statement. Do they require parang show money ba? And like how much kaya if
Um, in my case, wait, let me hmm, in walang show money. Walang show money. I think just they just want your bank statement. And at least in France you have to have when you renew your visa, because like they will give you only a visa for a year, student visa for a year initially, and then you have to renew that for example, your program is 2 years, your master's program is 2 years, or your PhD is 3 years. They will only give you a visa for 1 year, and then you have to renew while you're already there. And then you have to just have a proof that you can financially support yourself. So, for example, if your family sends you money from the Philippines, like your allowance, it has to be, I think, around 700 euros, 700 to 800 euros per month. You don't have, you just have to show proof that, okay, you have this amount of money and you can live in France with this, yeah, with this amount. So, Yeah, 700 euros is like what? 7 times 42,000 to 50,000 pesos. So you just have to prove that, and then they will give you another year for you to finish your program.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
and then I just want to backtrack a bit, Nicole. I'm
Yeah.
curious lang like 'di ba you applied abroad. What's the reason
Mhm.
why you decided sa abroad? Kasi maybe you mentioned na wala masyado dito but i- like can you give us an idea about neuroscience, the study of neuroscience in yung field mismo dito sa Philippines? Like is it not ano masyado
I think
not
there are,
more?
but
Yeah.
it's usually in the context of less research, or for me at least I didn't know a lot of people during that time. But um it's usually in the context of like medicine, less than research. And I wanted to do more parang research based, so like really like more into publishing than, for example, clinical work, right? Is that clear? So parang like usually yeah, you mostly work with patients, for example, but for me it was more okay, I wanted to study more like yung mechanisms of how the brain works. So it's like more like basic or fundamental research than clinical research. So I think it was that, and I didn't know a lot of people. I think, yeah, usually they have it, but for like in medicine. So when you're a doctor, for example, like
Mhm.
medical doctor,
Right.
but less
So,
like
yeah.
want a PhD.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
that's the difference between neurology and yung neuroscience mismo,
yeah,
right?
exactly,
Pero
exactly.
sa neuroscience, do you still dabble with yung parang a bit yung sa neurology na side, yung sa medical na side, or just purely talaga ano, research based na? Kasi I can
Uh,
imagine may mag-cross pa rin yan
of
na
course, of
studies, yeah.
course. Yeah, so there are people who are doing research study on neurology, for example. I mean, like they're working on people with trauma, like, and then they do the brain scans, MRI, that is usually done like in neurology, for example, or people who are working with patients with stroke, or like different therapies for neurological disorders, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, so which are usually like into clinical practice. But for us, at least in the field of neuroscience, we're not always all the time centered in like the treatments. I think that's the difference, because for example, when you go to a doctor, like a medical doctor, you would say, okay, these are your symptoms, and then okay, how can I feel better? How do you improve my health? For us, it's like, okay, what understanding why do you have this specific disease, or why is there this disease, what is the I think, like for me, the biological underpinnings of this disease, what are the specific proteins involved, what happens to your cells, what happens to your brains, what happened to your brain connections when you have this disease, let's say that. So it's really more like understanding and studying how everything works to contribute to um the medical side of it, at least in my opinion. So
Right. Even yung
yeah.
sa, I think you mentioned it before, yung history mismo ng ano, like on the genetics na side, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I think like, yeah, I think it's just two very different things. Like for us, it's basically like understanding what it is, and in the context of disease. But for like medical doctors, it would be okay, how do you make it better for the patient?
Mhm. Well, before we go lang further sa
Yeah.
studies mo, well, I'm really curious about yung sa work mo dito about yung study sa mga commercials.
Yeah.
I know
Sure.
na there's really a science behind it, but can you tell us like maybe in general lang what usually yung ina-implement ninyo na science, like what usually works ba in terms of capturing audience?
Yeah, so it's a thing. I mean, it's a one of the techniques in neuroscience is to, at least in the broader neuroscience, is like you use like facial coding. So, for example, we would install like cameras, and then that would track your like where your like it will follow your eyes, different features, like for example, your movement ng eyebrows, let's say, or where your eyes go when you're watching something, and then when you're speaking, like in different gestures. So it's usually with a camera, and then we would analyze like the responses where um like for example, specific stimuli, what you usually follow, what captures your attention. So it's usually one of the yeah, it's a facial coding technique.
Yeah.
And then
But
you would Yeah.
Yes, please go on.
No, usually, and then you usually correlate it with like brain studies. And then you would have different like parang EEG. EEG, like yung mga nilalagay in the skull to see, okay, what happens to your brain when you respond that way, when your eyes are going this way or that way. For some studies, yeah. One time I did like a study with like a famous company, and they would have, for example, they would have my one of my fingers in like a specific device, so to track my heart rate. One, and then they would put like some I don't know, there are like 16 electrodes, I think, that would put in my head, like in my skull. Like it's very compact, parang ka lang nagsusuot ng headset, but this are like different things like here. And then they would analyze how you, it was about leather, for example, how you smell leather, how you feel about leather. And on the other side, you will have to answer like different questions on your phone. So they are tracking like heartbeat, your emotions, and how you speak actually. In some studies, like they would record your voice, and then they would see, okay, the changes in your tone, and how do you correlate that with all of that, like your heartbeat, your brain signatures, brain like responses, your answers to the survey using your phone and your voice. And then to understand, okay, what type of person, let's say not person but a consumer, how which type of consumer are you? Or are you an expert in like assessing leather? How do you feel about leather? What emotions do you get from leather, from this specific type of leather more than the other? And before I was working also on perfumes, because I want to understand like how the brain, I mean, how we people feel about perfumes and different luxury perfumes, let's say. So how do you, okay, for one perfume, for example, it's like a Dior perfume. Is it perceived luxurious, and how do we increase this like positive experience with this specific perfume more than the other brands, let's say? So, and then we would use like different neuroscience techniques, EEG, like they would, like, yeah, skin, like in your skin, for example, and then they would track your face,
Mm-hmm.
interact
Wow.
with the, uh,
So private companies are actually hiring you, no, to for their
yeah.
making. Pero hindi kayo yung separate na like company na works with
There
another
are
company.
agencies. There are agencies that were, and then you have clients, for example, like market research agencies, and you just have clients, like for example, big brands, and then they contact you, and then okay, can you do a study on this specific like product, and then you just give them the insights.
Right.
So,
And how
but
long usually these studies take? Like when they give you a ano?
Really depends. Really depends on how big it is. Like I was working on a project before. Sometimes it can be 6 months, sometimes it can be 1 year because it's continuous study. So, for example, in study longitudinal studies, so they would like contact the same people, how they respond from before, and then 6 months before, 6 months after using the product. Like really depends, I think. Different questions, scientific questions, different type of research, let's say. It's pretty cool. Honestly, I would love to. Yeah.
But how many ilang tao kayo ang for one research, say for one product? Ilan usually kayo ang working on it?
Depends, because like merong people who are operations, so they would organize the whole like study, let's say. So parang planning research plan, for example. And then there are people who are into a lot of the data analysts,
Right.
right? Because like when you gather like different types of data, you have to have like different programming. You have to use different programming languages, for example, to analyze your data and how to make it comprehensive. How to collect data, people who are like interacting with the people to do the survey, to do the to ask the questions when you're doing like the research, for example. And then I think let's say
Right. Mhm.
five.
Pero when you actually do the test na parang sampling, right? So you also do it sa a couple like plenty of people na, 'di ba? Just
Yeah,
to get their
okay, the
responses.
participants depends. So before, when I was studying, this specific, I think we were gearing into like 30, looking to 30 to 60 people, like for one study. And the other ones, when I know some people who are doing like different studies, I think they just need 20 to 50, 20 to 25, sorry.
Right. And
Depends.
depending kung what product, then you would hone
Yeah,
in on that like
exactly.
age group, ganun.
Right. Different age group. For example, also like when you're studying luxury, let's say. not everyone is into luxury. So for example, you would get like only what 10 to 20, and then you would get also non-experts in luxury, like to balance, to see like different biases. So let's say mas marami kang makukuha ng mga non-experts than experts, right? Because like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of rich people, but how do you get them to make it to like study them, for example?
Yeah.
So
Um,
yeah.
I'm curious lang, Nicole. Maybe are there like certain strategies that we can pin down, like mga common lang na strategies na you think na are from different yung types of different research from different products na parang may commonality sila that works ba? Like I don't know, maybe well I know like for example, but this is sa posting social media, like yung sabi nila yung cover photo use bright colors to gain
Ah,
more ganon. Sa commercial, mga TV commercials may mga commonalities ba rin sila?
good question. I've not worked with commercials for years now. Sorry, I don't remember. I don't know also like how much it evolved, of course, but di ko na maalala. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Kasi
I think
I'm thinking na of course meron naman per generation na mga
right, exactly.
preferences, but I think meron
Mm.
din pang universality sa like human
I think
behavior na.
so. There must be. There must be. I think I I
Maybe
would
ano,
just
siguro no, parang mga dopaminergic na type na content
mm,
like make you feel good, emotion
yeah.
driven.
I think it's mostly like, well, mm, just hypothesis. Maybe it's like looking at the faces. I mean, like for example, you see a commercial, you would look at the person, and then what is important also, like I would not forget this. For example, if you hire like different people, it is also important for like a specific brand or specific commercial. It's also important to like, so ba may artista ka na i-hire. It's important how the artista is perceived, like in general, before you get them, right? Like,
Parang
because
background check yung
yeah,
reputation niya.
background.
Right.
Exactly. When you put them in and then if meron bang clash between the brand and the artista, for example, that you use for commercials. But I think it's a lot about, I would not say looking good, but it's more about just like it's an attention thing. Like what captures your attention. I think it's mostly that. Mm. So,
Okay, so I guess we can move on sa well, I'm curious lang this yung sa studies mo before, yung more recent. About yung sa zebrafish, I think it was in your master thesis. Could you tell us more about it?
yeah. So during my master's, I was studying like specific brain circuits for fear and anxiety, because for example, like we know that fear and anxiety related responses, these are universal things. Like parang since from evolution, whatever, these are like very like innate responses that, for example, if you're an animal, there's a predator, how would you respond to that? So they're like freeze. So either you freeze, so you don't do anything, or you flight, so you run away from a specific like stimuli or like harmful stimuli or aversive stimuli, or you fight. So these are like basic mechanisms of from like way before us, before everything, and this is conserved during evolution. I mean, like you have this, animals have it, lower organisms have it too, like even zebrafish have it. So zebrafish are like really really small like organisms, and we usually study them for like biology because it's easier to assess behaviors, and their brains are tiny, and there are different techniques in neuroscience that would allow you to actually like look at the brain response, because you can make them transparent. So we can use like different microscopes to make the whole zebrafish transparent, like zebrafish larvae, so babies of you make them transparent, and then you study the brain without being invasive. Because in neuroscience, there are techniques like, for example, that are very invasive. Like, imagine like doing MRI on a fish. So you study the brain responses in a fish. You keep them in a specific environment, and then you can study how the brain responds, without like putting electrodes or whatever, like because in some rodent studies they put electrodes to study the brain, like you kind of put like a camera inside, to record like brain activity. And so what we would do is we would study these zebrafish in different contexts to understand specific circuits in the brain that are responsible for fear and anxiety, because it's important for people who are suffering from like anxiety related disorders and like specifically PTSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder, people who are like, for example, pag meron ka mga traumatic responses and then you still have like memories of that. Yeah, I mean, like, how do you extinguish these specific like traumatic responses or behaviors from like a traumatic event? So we're studying this like specific circuits, and we would do it in fish. So uh yeah, we would present like aversive stimuli to fish, and then we would study like the brain activity. Yeah,
Right.
to make
Wait,
yeah.
zebrafish, is it ba okay, fish mismo yung sa yung is this the stripe?
Yeah. Okay, that's why it's
Yes.
zebrafish, because like
Yeah.
may mga parang stripes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because
Yeah.
I used to we used to have aquariums then, so I'm quite medyo
Yeah.
familiar din sa mga isda. Um so okay, ang how come you can uh like relate the responses of the zebrafish to say other mammals or animals? You mean to say meron talaga siyang similarities from a fish to kasi mas complex yung I can
Right.
imagine, di ba?
Right. Of course, of course. So mammals usually have more complex behaviors than zebrafish, but we have like um 70, I think, if correct me if I'm wrong, but like I think 75% of the genes are conserved like in mammals. Like it's kind of, we have like 75% kind of like that similarity in terms of genetic signatures, and the brains are simpler like to study compared to mammals. There are different techniques that are easier to study in zebrafish than in mammals. So if we really want to go into like very basic behaviors, we can study like zebrafish. So which is why we use them. Mm.
Anong like results or findings ninyo like based sa study?
Actually, well, I didn't have a lot, which is normal. I didn't have a lot of findings for that. I only did it for like 6 months, for in the context of my master's thesis, so I didn't have a lot. But we were just trying to understand how, so GABA B receptors, so these are inhibitory receptor, I mean, these are inhibitory responses in the brain, and how we can integrate them in like the specific circuit, if they're part of it or not. What are, like, you have excitatory signals and inhibitory signals, how do you balance them out? And we just identify specific role for this specific protein. That's it. So yeah, not much.
Yeah.
It was just
Yeah.
6 months.
Yeah. And I can imagine rin no kasi there are several factors like I know like zebrafish parang say maybe maka-affect rin yung herd mentality niya kasi they go in like schools, marami sila. So
Exactly.
maybe meron niyang like another factor in like the animal response.
Yeah, there are people studying like groups of fish actually. Like, so for us, we were doing like individuals lang, but I know for some people they would track behaviors of a lot of fish, one tank, let's say, and then they would follow how they would respond. So yeah, of course. Yeah.
Because 'di ba like hindi lang 'yan on the genetic level on the like biological level but also yung sa environmental na
Right.
yeah,
Of
right.
course, like a social aspect, for
Yes.
example, of how, for example, if ikaw as a fish, let's say, ikaw ganito ka mag-respond, how are you seen by like the other fish in your group, and that you would modify your response also, like, okay, yes, there are people. I mean, there are people who are studying this. It's pretty cool. Mm, mm.
Yeah, interesting nga yung human behavior. It's one thing na I'm interested to learn more in. Kasi it really affects yung a lot of our everyday like actions, activities. Okay, so going to your recent na research. So you're in your fourth year na. Is it the final na year sa on your ano?
I should have graduated actually, because usually in France, like PhDs are by contract 3 years, but if you're in biology, it's kind of hard to finish a whole PhD in 3 years. So usually people extend 4th year or 5 years, maximum 5 years, because they don't want you like staying longer. But yeah, usually 4 years. So now I'm in my incoming 4th year. I want to finish next year, hopefully. So yeah, now I'm working on, so as I mentioned previously, working on neurodevelopmental disorders and neurodegeneration. So neurodevelopmental disorders, yeah, yun yung parang mga diseases or like conditions that you see from birth. So usually genetic, but that's not the case because meron din mga environmental factors like how your mom behaves during pregnancy that might affect your like development after. So
Also,
of
that's
course,
actually a real thing, no, na like a real
maternal
science
effect.
na it affects them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have maternal, like for example, you have if you have moms that are smoking or drinking alcohol during pregnancy, it can affect behavior of the child when they grow up, and how their brain develops um, how their brain develops in the tummy and
So it's
after.
true na, well, we just hear them sa mga like what mga post, mga ganun. Pero it's true pala na it affects maybe yung I don't know the proper word for that. Pero yung retardation ng
Yeah, mental retardation. Yeah, cognitive deficits, let's say. Yeah, cognitive deficits, and even not even that, just also emotional responses. For example, like for some children, I think there are studies showing more like aggressivity, more aggressive behaviors, or the other way around. Like, they're more prone to depression or anxiety when they grow older. If
wow.
you suffered like environmental effects, meaning that when your mom was like smoking or drinking or subject to different like environmental stressors while she was carrying you.
Oh wow.
Yeah, there are some children who are more prone to this. Yeah.
Pero Nicole, I'm curious, 'di ba hindi ba sa Philippines yung maternity leave it's after na the giving birth, 'di ba?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
Not
yeah kasi I think important yan na research yung while the mother is still pregnant kasi you said it affects yung ano, yung child. So perhaps ang maternity leave it should extend
Mm,
a bit before pa during birth, 'di ba? If that's the case.
yeah, that's very
Kasi some
important.
mothers
Oh,
still working and like
right, right. Yeah, that's an interesting thing because like here in France, maternity leave is very long. Parang meron kang specific like I think 3 months before and 3 months after. And then you
also
also have
before. Nice, nice.
before and after. So in total, like 6 to 7 months that you're paid. I think if I'm not mistaken. And then meron ka ng paternity leave. I think it's like 1 to 2 months, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't know. I don't remember how it is in the Philippines, but yeah, here it's pretty long because, I mean, once you give birth, it's not like, okay, you can start working again. Like you have to be there for the child, for example, like the early developmental like steps. You have to be there, like as a mom, as a parent. So yeah.
But going back to the question, you mentioned something about yung pag-give birth na. What about may studies ba about yung does the mother have to be like in a like a good emotional state, mental state when yung breastfeeding period? Like does it affect ba yung
Ah,
milk niya
that's a good
sa babies?
question. That's a good question. I'm not sure. But I would think so. I would think so. Like, um, in any case, I think it's always nice for the mom to be in a good emotional state, physical and emotional state, and not even that because not even only the mom, because I read a paper I think like a month ago or 2 months ago where they discovered that it's not only the mom but actually also the dad who should not be drinking alcohol, let's say.
Oh wow.
Yeah, months before or like months before, um like if you're trying to have a baby before insemination insemination, let's say, because it affects like the sperm health, sperm quality. So
No, that's
and
good. Ano ha? That's good
yeah,
information. Na,
yeah, it's
but
I think
it's so final na findings or under
yeah, I think it was published. I can look for it and I can send it to you. But yeah, it only for me the takeaway is that it's not only the mom who has to be taking care of herself, let's say, which you would think, oh, she should not drink, she should not smoke, she should be in good emotional state, physical state, but also the dad, like he participates in all of this. So yeah, he should not be drinking like months before, if you're trying to have a baby, like months before, like the whole thing, or this,
Wow, huh?
yeah.
Yeah, I can
So
imagine that's a very useful information. Like, like what
I
about
wouldn't
those
think
people
about,
na
right?
who have conceived a baby na nalasing sila? Parang mga ganun, di ba?
Right.
But
Yeah, we'll
yeah,
see.
it I hope na ma-spread yan sa more sa like mainstream
Hmm.
na ano. So going back lang sa research, you said na about yung development stage or yung prior pa sa ano mismo finding the illness or the yeah
Yeah.
disease.
So it's like so that's the theme of my research, and we're trying to understand, okay, if we can trace like the specific neurodegenerative disorders, so like the ones that appear at a later time point, or later point in life. If we can trace the developmental origins, if there are developmental origins, how can we like prevent that from develop? How can we prevent the disease from developing? And also, if we can intervene at the middle, for example, what are if there are different therapies that we can do before the symptoms develop or show up, then that would be like very helpful, you know. So we're trying to see like are there developmental effects, defects, um, yeah.
Yeah. And how do you know that say ano ba yung mga common na mga disease na ano sa brain? How do you trace that back sa early stages?
So, I mean, usually, common neurodevelopmental disorders that, I mean, are usually kind of genetic, let's say. So you have your parang ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So it would show up during development. I mean, like when you're a child, like you would see like some kids have more energy than others, let's say. And then you have autism. So they have cognitive deficits, difficulty like recognizing emotions for some cases. Like it's spectrum, right? So there are different like symptoms um, for other kids. Yeah, so these are mostly kind of genetic or environmental. Depends also like how as I said, like how the mom is during pregnancy, for example, emotional state or the physical state of the mom during pregnancy that can give rise to these different disorders. So these are the common ones. The one that I'm studying is like a genetic disease, so it's a rare genetic disorder where you have like people. So usually, so before you would see only it as a neurodegenerative disorder because people, I think yung average age of onset is around 30 to 50, let's say, like medyo mid-age na, or like in older adults where you have like gait problems or problems with walking, imbalance, you have like paralysis in the lower limbs. So nahihirapan sila maglakad or they would have balance issues. And so this is the center of my research. It's called hereditary spastic paraplegia. And then so it's genetic because you would have it. I mean, if one parent has it, the other parent has it, you will have it. Or just if just one parent has it, then you have the probability to have it too. High probability. And so we're trying to see, okay, but now there are cases where you will see this at when children are born. Like parang may mga earlier onset cases na parang one month old, meron na showing symptoms already, where we thought, okay, the symptoms will only show up at a later time point. Then yeah, mga parang 1 month old or 3 years old na children having this specific condition. So we're trying to understand, okay, there are maybe there are developmental traces to that. And then if we can intervene earlier for them to not develop the symptoms at a later time point pag tumanda na sila, like in the brain and the spinal cord. So I'm studying like the connection between the brain and the spinal cord, and I use mouse as an animal model. So I use mice and I study mice and to see like during brain development how these connections form. So parang like there are actions, for example, from the brain to the spinal cord where they go, and there are different like ways yung parang path of the specific neuron to go nandito sa brain to the spinal cord pababa. Because there are different like ways to go there and there's specific like paths na dapat i-follow based on different signals from the brain and like from the brain to know where the neuron should go, where the axon should go. So I'm studying that, like how neurons behave, for example, in a dish, let's say that I would take from mouse embryos, and then I would study, I mean, culture, grow them in a dish, and then follow how they behave.
Okay, so I'm curious lang about the
Yeah.
intervention that's being done. Like, can you tell us like what interventions are being done like during the early stages?
Yeah, so I think the early stages, mostly ang ginagawa is therapy. So like physical therapy. So you go to a physical therapist like to help you move. So yun yung parang pinaka main intervention. There's a couple of drugs, but um there are a couple of drugs that I think are supposed to work, but I am not sure about this. But usually it's like more therapy and drug intervention. So pharmacological interventions.
Yeah. Pero meron bang ano ngayon, sort of treatment na parang completely remove na yung mga certain like brain diseases?
Complete. Oh, good question. For common neurological disease, Alzheimer's, they're still looking for a cure for that. Parkinson's, there are treatments to manage, but never like completely remove. Then you have for other psychiatric conditions, neuropsychiatric conditions like ADHD or autism, there are um therapy, like psychotherapy to manage, like cognitive behavioral therapy, for example, but there are drugs, I think. Depression also and anxiety, but it's never completely removed. It's all about managing the specific disorder, I think.
Right. And I
Yeah.
think that's what makes your study important. Maybe it's too late na to intervene during those late stages. So
Mhm.
maybe you catch them at an
Yeah, at the earlier
earlier.
time, yeah. So that's why, like, this is what we're trying to do. Obviously, it's a long way because first we have to prove na there is developmental traces, like during development. And if not, then okay, what do we do? If yes, okay, nice. Then what do we do? That's the next step. But for us, it's really like starting, okay, is there a developmental signature or not? If yes, then what do we do after? Like what are the therapies we can develop? So, yeah,
I'm
long.
curious lang, Nicole, since you mentioned what you're planning to do. Usually, kasi as a of course, as a yung mga non-scientist trying to understand lang yung roadmap of what you're doing. So, take for example itong research mo. Do you have like a roadmap on how this um, study will further develop and like put it into like how do you say mga praxis ba?
Mm. Yeah, so usually what happens, I mean, at least in the research side, first you try to study, okay, like in basic mechanisms or like fundamental mechanisms. Like, okay, yes, there's the developmental trace. You test different things. You use different animals to try to prove like a specific hypothesis, like your idea, let's say. So yun, parang at least in biological science, we try to understand really at the deeper level what happens to the brain, what happens to the cells, what are the different like um how do the neurons behave, let's say, and how do you from neurons, how it goes to the brain, how they connect. So this part, like the kind of more like biological part, like fundamental research part, basic mechanisms, what are the organizing principles, and then you move into, okay, now we find this specific like protein or this specific circuits. Then you move kind of into like therapeutics. So then some other people, like at least in pharmacological companies, they would try to develop drugs to kind of, okay, what works for this specific disease or not. And then you will have like the FDA approvals, different clinical trials to move into, okay, then this is now for the public. So it's more like, okay, first you do basic research, then you do the clinical trials, clinical testing, and then now it's available to the public. Kind of like that. At least, yeah, at least what I know, yeah. It's very long.
Yeah. How long do these mga take effect ba usually? Like from the research part hanggang sa yung
The
last na
whole
stage.
At least for the research part, I'm still working on that. And that's what, like years. I think, well, depende, I think 10 years, 10 year, 5 to 10 years. Depende also sa clinical trials. What if they don't work? So then you would have to try to find other drugs or other mechanisms. Maybe I'm not studying the correct protein actually. So then you would have to come back to, okay, basic basic science again. So it's long and it's unpredictable.
Right,
Right?
right. Right. Pero say Nicole, I'm just curious lang. I mean even in your like
Of course.
own like journey as a scientist, say successful yung research mo, you have positive findings. And okay, nag-move in na siya into yung sinabi mo na medicine, they come up with
Mm.
drugs for that. But what's next for you as a scientist? Like do
Like
you look for other like related na ano na
mm,
research for that, or like what's the usual
usual
practice for
path
scientists? Yeah, the
be
path.
like so usually like at least in my field, so you do your PhD, well, or other people, so they start with masters, and then after the masters they don't do a PhD anymore. They usually go to like pharma companies, biotech companies, they work, they become scientists there, they get into different positions. In academia it's different because there's a lot of like different levels of like filtering, which I don't like, but anyway, so you do a masters, you do a PhD. Everything is like a competition to get a PhD position. It's like a you have to be really good, whatever. And then they give you a PhD. Then you do a postdoc. That takes like 1 to 2 years, let's say, or 3 years, depending on your contract. You do one postdoc and then you do another postdoc. So that's two postdocs. And then it varies now by country. But for example, what I know is that then you get a research position. Then after some time, like a research scientist position, and then you become head of a lab, let's say. And then okay, then you apply for funding for your research. And then you can teach also like in universities if you want to do like a professor track, let's say. And yeah, you just continue like that. When you have your own lab, you manage, you produce research, you apply for funding. And usually by that time you're gonna be what, like 40, let's say,
Right.
30 to 40,
Yeah.
after all the studying
Yeah, I
and
was gonna
research
ask you
you're
that,
doing.
like, how old now will you be by the time you finished all those things?
I don't know. I,
But of course, it depends naman talaga on the study. Pero
right.
when you said, so you mean to say like when you have your own lab, maybe is it safe to say like that's yung parang aspiration for scientists so that they can have more freedom in their research?
Right, right. I think for some, yes. I think this is evolving now too, because over time, parang medyo umuunti na yung tao that are, I mean, there's still a lot of people, but because of like this very competitive like nature, and also there's a lot of like different factors, for example, that are not very helpful for scientists to to become like to have their own labs. There's less and less people, but yeah, it's for some people they don't aspire anymore to have their own lab and do their own research. Some people, because they just move to industry, they work as scientists like in different industries after their PhD, because in academia at least there's like a lot of unfair treatment. Like it's not the best environment, let's say, for some people to stay in academia because of like competition, funding issues. Because what if people don't want to fund your research? What do you do? Then you will have to like apply, keep applying until okay, some labs close because they don't have funding. And so, um, and then yeah, aside from competition, lack of job security. So your position can be taken at any time. So then what do you do? Then there's like there's this culture of like publications, like just have to publish all the time even if your science is not good, like just publish your research. And so you kind of like just do okay whatever just to say okay, the paper is out, the findings are out, but it's not good and you did not quality check. So you're kind of like wasting a lot of time, money, resources on things that are not good, just because you have to publish, you feel like you have to publish first more than anyone. So it's like really like very, very competitive, that affects mental health of like these scientists, among a lot of things. And also another thing in academia, at least, is that you have to follow where the science is, which means that you have to move a couple of times in your career in different countries, in different places, to do your research, which for some can work, but for some people who have families who don't want to move, there's this expectation that, oh, you have to move for your career. So for me, for example, an expectation, at least in France, let's say, is that after I do finish my PhD, it would be nicer, or they expect you to move to a different country, do a postdoc there for 1 to 2 years, and then come back to France. with your new learning and your new experience. But for other people who have families and who have like established their life here, you cannot keep moving all the time because like what about your family? Or it depends really on what is important to you, you know. But and for some people this is hard. And also it's not always easy to move from country to country, not knowing the language or not. And just uprooting your life kind of for your career. So yeah, it's just these are like some issues I can point about like academic research. So people sometimes they just do their masters or they finish their PhDs and then they move to industry because then there's more security. Then you have like more work-life balance also, and then you are paid well. Because in academia we are not paid very well. You're not paid very well for the work that you do. And then you stay like in the lab for overnight, like you go on the weekends to produce like research or results, um but you're not paid well, let's say. So yeah, it's a
Right,
lot of
right.
sacrifice actually and a lot of
Wow.
different things, but
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
thanks for like shedding light on that yung
Yeah,
sa like
so
how
science,
your career goes as a scientist kasi it's like
right?
myself I really have no idea like what
Yeah,
goes on after
right.
sa ganun. So parang ano rin siya no in a way yung whether you go have a uh 9 to 5 job or like go on a like a solo business,
Mm-hmm.
um like
Yeah,
having your own business parang ganun.
yeah. Like managing a lab, I think it's like managing a lot, like a business, for example, because you have to apply for funding, and then parang di ka na natutulog actually, because yeah,
Yeah,
for some
that's
people,
I
yeah,
can imagine like the stress involved in like staying in the
oh,
academia. And so
yeah,
okay, going back lang sa publishing,
mhm,
kasi I've learned na 'di ba there's such a thing as peer review. Hindi pala yan pini-peer review when
right.
you publish.
You have to before publication. Depends on the journal, but some journal like the high impact factor journals, they do a lot of peer review. I mean, they're very stringent on these things, very strict, let's say. But for some journals, okay, like pag mga AI related content nakakapasa nga eh. Like so there's not much quality control, quality check. So really, but yeah, even the peer review process, you're not paid to review. They ask people to review for you. They review your paper, let's say, but you're not paid. It says, okay, this is contribution to science, but I mean that's your time that is taken, and then journals get the money for that. Like that's not sustainable. You don't get review. You even have to pay for your research to be published, and that's like thousands of euros for one paper. So like crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in a way also na talking about yung sa getting funding in a way you have to be to know how to like yung mga sales pitch na ganun like to have funding.
Kind of. Yeah. Yeah. To to like how do you sell your research? Like what will this contribute to the world? You know, like and if you're applying for okay, specific foundations or associations, what will you do for the people who are actually like, for example, in this context of disease, like what will your research contribute to the people who are suffering from this disease? So usually, yeah, you have to sell your science in a sense. Be a scientist is to be a lot of things. Like you have to be able to do your job well, then you have to be able to sell your science, then you have to communicate your science well because people will not understand if I tell you the specific like things that I'm doing. Not everyone will understand, like especially if you're a non-scientist. So there's like you wear like kind of different hats when you're a scientist. Just there's a lot of expectations for you. Um, yeah. So it's not easy. It's not easy. Then at the end they will tell you, yeah, but you're doing this because you're interested in it. Yes, but but interest can only take you far. I mean, I have to eat. I have
Exactly.
to pay my rent, you know.
Right,
So,
right. You know what? I can relate. I mean, as architects can also relate kasi parang well, I guess some take it as parang business. But if you like take this
mm,
seriously, yan din ang usual na common na sinasabi na don't take architecture if you want to be like have financial stability or you want to be rich.
right.
Yeah, parang ganun.
Mm.
Going back
There's a
lang
lot of
to
instability,
yeah,
no? There's a lot of instability in your field. I
yeah,
mean, like in
yeah.
terms like you getting clients and everything. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, parang ganun din like what you said na you have to wear several hats.
Mm,
But like I said, pwede naman like some go for yung contractual, they call it contractors, like you take care of the
mm,
building of these structures, of this architecture. But like if you're going, I guess yung yun din parang academia sa inyo, sa inyo. Sa amin, if you go to design mainly, parang there's not much, well you can of course, but hindi siya yung
mm.
parang grabe ka lucrative na ano, na path
Right.
rin.
Exactly.
Especially if you take
Like
this
you
seriously, like ganun.
right. That's true. Like people seem to assume that like I live, I mean, I live a good life because I'm in France, I'm in Europe, I'm abroad, but they don't see like the realities of these things. Like you're not gonna get rich in science. If you're in science, it's like you're gonna be poor. To be blunt, you know. Yeah, it
Pero
is.
ang itong funding na sinabi mo, Nicole, does the
Yeah.
government sa like from your experience or yung sa mga narinig mo and from different countries, okay ba yung funding ng government or do you have to rely on private companies?
Good question. That's country dependent. At least for France, we get some funding. There are also private like sectors that help fund the research. But it really depends on how the country like places importance on science, let's say, or like scientific research. So at least in France, it's okay. We get money, we get funding. Also, we are helped by the European Union. So the European Union gets like specific amount of funding and money for that. But for other countries, especially like for example in the Philippines, that's hard. Like you don't get a lot of funding for your research, which is unfortunate. Yeah. So at least in France, I think we're okay. Like especially doing medical research. So I think we're okay. The students get paid, PhD students get paid, and they have rights. Um, yeah. So
Yeah. It's,
medyo
you know what, it's all the more parang I think important na thing like Reina Reyes, you know, like Pinoy scientist. I
yeah,
mean, yeah.
scientists,
So it's important like what she's doing just to put
right?
scientists on the mainstream para ma-recognize kayo ng like what you're doing by
Of
the
course.
public, then the government supports you.
Yeah.
Well, we can ease up na lang a bit on the ano
Mm,
the hard science part.
yeah.
Okay, I have to ask you this question kasi
Tell me.
usually kasi during the course of the interview nakakalimutan ko na may mga question ako nakalimutan and it's like frustrating to know na that question I want to ask you pa nakalimutan ko. But anyway, this is just like a hindi naman to related science. Boxing. You're interested in boxing, right? I mean,
Ah,
I've read.
yes, very much. Yes.
So,
Yes.
yeah, tell us about it.
Yeah, so I did boxing when I was what I was in university. I was trying to lose weight. So I was like boxing a lot. And then I love it. And then it's still here when and I'm in France, I still do it regularly. I try to do, I mean, as I mentioned, like as a scientist, life is hard. So now at least I really take the time to take care of myself because also it's brain health. Like good health is good brain health. So I really try to do sports, I try to run, I try to engage myself in activities that I enjoy. So I do boxing. One of my goals before I turn 30 is to at least try to compete in like a boxing. Yeah. So I'm gonna try that and
You
to
should.
train.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see.
Pero is it like more, parang sorry, more on parang inter-gym na competition or like you really
Yeah,
want to go
like
amateur?
no, like just inter gym, whatever. I don't
Yeah,
care.
yeah.
And then yeah, but that's the thing. Like in boxing, so I really like it, but also as a scientist, it's not really good like for your brain if you do it like a lot. I mean, if you're like into professional boxing,
I
because
mean,
one,
getting hit in the head.
yeah, getting hit in the head, like you can develop like traumatic brain injury, different brain diseases. So it really takes a toll on your body. So I'm like, okay, well, let's just do it once, and then
Right.
like but I really like it. I try to do much more sports as I can, eating healthier, not a lot of alcohol because it's not good for you too. Yeah, so I try to have like a work-life balance, let's say. So that's
Nice.
important.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, yeah, boxing, alam mo, I even maybe in ano ba sinasabi na alternative universe or whatever, probably I would have pursued that kasi
Yeah.
but I came in late. I mean, I took interest late na, and I can
Mhm.
see the beauty and like the boxing. Even like alam mo yung watching yung mga boxers do the punching bag even sa videos, like
Right.
wow, I
Yeah,
love watching
exactly.
that.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Oh.
And then when I used to train, they would tell me, for example, here they would ask me, "Hey, are you okay? Like, you have to wear like all the gears because we're gonna do like sparring and stuff." Said, and they find it funny because I really actually like it when people hit me.
Right.
Are you okay?
That's
Why are you enjoying this? Yes, I like it. I would laugh and I would like I really like when people hit me in the face, but obviously with like gear, you know, gear they protect, like you cannot go sparring without like the headgear, without the mouth guard, like for insurance purposes, whatever, but still
right.
it's
Pero
important. Yeah.
even ano no, yeah, even alam mo, even myself, I was supposed to do like yung parang, but I was already in my 30s at that time.
Mm.
Yung inter-gym nga, but then I injured my back, and
Yeah.
so my God, sayang.
Ah, sayang.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I like the yung like physicality ng ano, even not the boxing itself, but yung exercise, yung parang naubusan ka ng hangin,
Right.
'di ba?
Yeah, cardio. It's a lot of
Yung
cardio.
cardio, wow. Yeah, it's a lot of cardio, but parang nakakamiss, no? Like
Yeah,
if you
it's
don't
really
do it, yeah, for
good.
a while.
Yeah. You
Right.
don't do it for a while, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's good
Oh,
na we're talking about this because it takes away yung parang mga stigma sa being a scientist, 'di ba? Like even
yeah.
I really appreciate yung Pinoy scientist na page ni Reina,
Mhm.
because it takes yung it just puts the parang humanity sa
Right.
science.
That's because people don't know. Like you, mainly the question, I think, like, what is a scientist actually? Like at the beginning, like, do you think you're a scientist? Because for some people, if you don't have the PhD, oh, you're still not a scientist. For some people, if you get the master's, you're a scientist. But what defines a scientist? You don't know. And like for some people, like they just see, okay, she's publishing or like she's abroad, whatever, and they don't know actually the struggles of being in science. So yeah, it's a hard but yeah, Pinoy science is really good. There's also another thing I like. Well, if we're in this topic, I wanted to promote.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm like, so I don't know if you know, like Grad Map Philippines.
Oh yeah, yung
S-
parang
Yeah,
you help people go to
go to
studies
graduate school actually.
yes,
So the goal also is to like make STEM education accessible. So I met a lot of people there, and I was also like kind of a mentor, and well, I was a mentee. So people offer like one-on-one mentorship on how to like go into graduate school. What are the different application procedures? How do you improve your essays to if you're applying abroad or you're applying in the Philippines? So we this organization is to supposed to help you like apply for graduate school if you don't know people. So they will match you to different scientists of different interests. So, for example, if you're interested in, let's say, I want to do a physics master's, they will match you with someone abroad or like someone doing physics, like PhD or a postdoc, for example, and help guide you in the process, which I think is important, especially since when I was applying, I didn't know anyone, right? So yeah, I did like some mentorship. I know someone. So she asked me, I think I just got a Facebook message saying like, "Hey, how did you get into the field of neuroscience?" And so we did like kind of like a one like a Zoom meeting, for example. And then she's interested in biology. She applied and she got like the Eiffel scholarship in France. So now she's coming in September. So we did
nice,
whole
nice. Yeah.
interview process and so I'm super happy about that because like we checked like I really helped her kind of like get into the path and now she got I mean she's good overall, you know. I didn't doubt that she would get here. It's just like the whole process because she really did not know at the beginning when the application start, when does it end, how do I come to France? And now she's coming in September. So she got into a master's program for from her bachelor's degree in the Philippines, and it's a 2-year program. So, and she got a scholarship too. And I told her like just apply to the thing. Like you never know anyway. And she got it. So that's cool.
That's good.
Like yeah, I'm happy.
Yeah.
I'm super happy about that.
Yeah.
And we keep
And
in contact.
yeah. Alam
Yeah.
mo, by the way, I just nakausap kami ni Reina. I just interviewed her
Yeah.
last Saturday.
Mm,
She did mention na yung importance ng yung say parang networking sa field of science just to go to other, I mean just to be able to endorse you sa ibang mga ano studies like schools.
mm,
Pero
yeah.
ang although not necessarily yung through grad map but even like just talking to people and ano like getting
Mm,
to know them, talking
right.
about your research ganun,
Yeah.
then you can link up ganun. Yeah. So that's one
Yeah.
important ano no advice for ano aspiring
Mm-hmm.
na
A lot
scientist.
of
Yeah.
networking. It's a lot of
Yeah.
networking. So
Right. Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay, final na lang na question. Don't want you to
Okay.
take much of your time. Usually I ask naman rin ng mga guests ko on their field like what's your advice for aspiring scientists?
Hmm. I think just I think the main advice I would say is just try. Just try things. Because you never know anyway. For example, like I apply it like in the different stages. For example, when you're applying to graduate school, just try. Even if you feel like, oh, you're not, I felt that. I mean, in comparison to like international students, people coming from all over the world, bakit ako pipiliin out of all like the students applying, you know? Like for example, during my master's, I didn't know that 200 people were applying that year. They only took like 15. So like it's a lot of like self-doubt in different steps of the way when you're doing your research also in the lab. Like you would always question yourself, am I good enough to be here? Am I smart enough? Am I hardworking enough? Even if like other people tell you, no, you're good and like you're smart or whatever. It's not being smart. It's just like it's more about like resilience and actually having the guts to say, okay, I will just try. I will just keep trying in whatever. You will face a lot of rejections, failures, wrong hypothesis, wrong ideas or incorrect like questions. Let's say when you're doing experiments, it's gonna be the first time it will not be good, or it's always the first time we say this, like that first experiment will always fail anyway. There's a lot of failures, you will have a lot of rejections. Even if you're like a senior scientist or like you're having your own lab, you will not probably not get funding for your research. You will have like a lot of applications where you will get rejected. But I think the advice that I will get is just try, always try for anything. You never know anyways. And it's like there's a lot of like randomness in the universe. There's also like this element of like luck, for example, and that we don't take into account. But just for me, like put in the work that you feel like is necessary, and then just try. Just try in anything. Like even if you get rejected, even if like they say you're not good or you're not fit for this specific position, or you will never manage to make it, like just try it and you never know, honestly. I mean, that's better than saying, okay, why didn't I try, like regretting that you didn't try at least once in your life to do this. So yeah, I think it's just that, like growing a thick skin. Like even if you reject me, whatever, I will still try a different thing, different thing, different thing. I will get somewhere, you know. So yeah. Yeah, I think it's that. I applied to 20, yeah, I said like 10 to 15 programs for my master's. I got rejected in like some of them. I'm like, did that stop me? No, I will be there. So I will be there. I will make it. Yeah, I will be a scientist. That's it. So
It's
yeah,
perseverance talaga no.
yeah, yeah, just try things. I
And
miss
that's a
that.
good advice. I mean, I'm sure yung a lot of people feel discouraged. It's a common
Yeah.
naman yan na sa mga tao, no? And like in life in general now, that's a good like words of encouragement, no?
I hope so. That's what I tell people actually. But obviously, like we cannot remove the fact that okay, there are like different factors to take into account. Like, okay, you can always try, but like okay, financial stuff, if you want to go study abroad, like not everyone has like the money to be able to go here. So then you try for scholarships, then different things, right? But yeah, for me it's like just if you really want it, like try, go in whichever way you can, like just try to do it
Nice.
if you're sure.
Nice.
Oh, but yeah, I think that.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you so much for all
Thank you.
your
Thank you for having me.
information and knowledge. I really enjoyed the conversation, and
Yeah, me too. Really nice
yeah.
discussion.